And if you're not incorporated, or let me put it this way, if you use your surname, you're not assuming anything. You don't need an assumed name. And so by filing a DBA, if you look up the term doing business in Black's Law, it applies in reference only to a foreign corporation. And so it's my understanding, I'm not an attorney, and this isn't legal advice, but the correlation I make is that if you have a DBA, you're declaring that you're a foreign corporation. Now, who's supposed to pay taxes? Your children or the strangers passing through your land? Yeah, you're strangers, okay? That's why foreigners that occupy Texas have to pay the fee for the privilege of, quote, doing business in this state. And even the term in this state, that phrase, has a special definition. And it means within the exterior limits of Texas and includes federal territory inside Texas. That's where the state sales tax applies. And it's with foreign corporations. And so anyway, that's about all I have. I'm sure I've used up my time frame, but yeah. Oh. I can't make a legal determination about that. No, actually what happened was I got so frustrated and I just had enough of it that on August 30th of last year, I called up the comptroller and I said, cancel my contract. Well, I've never heard it put like that before. Well, I don't care. Cancel this number. And so I canceled. Before I canceled the number, I went down to the sub-courthouse and I abandoned my assumed name. I didn't change the name of my business. I just got rid of that contract, you know, the permission from the government to use this name when it's already my name. I don't need their permission to use that name. It's mine. Why do I need their permission? Why should I petition them? Why should I even pay them? You know, I had to pay to get rid of to abandon my assumed name. I had to pay them after I paid them to get it. I think it cost me more to get rid of it than it did to get it. And so, you know, it's just one of those things where an assumed name, I think, is one of these adhesion contracts that you hear about because you're putting yourself in the jurisdiction as a foreign corporation. And like I said, I quit collecting state sales tax on August 30th of last year. I haven't collected a penny since. Now, about a month or so after I canceled the contract, a little girl came around, an enforcement officer from the comptroller. I wasn't there at the time, and she stuck her head in the door and are y'all displaying your tax number? And my wife, unknowingly at the time, she didn't know I'd taken down the number off the wall. And she said, yeah, but you can't see it. It's over there behind the shelves. But it wasn't up. It was not displayed. And she left and hadn't heard anything else from him. So I called up a guy that I've had some dealings with at the comptroller's office. And I asked him, I said, has this number been canceled? Oh, yeah, canceled August 30th. I said, am I under investigation or anything? No, it doesn't show anything. I said, okay, thanks. And that was, you know, August 30th of last year, so I haven't collected any tribute, and I haven't made any payments. Now, the other thing to think about, when y'all are out shopping, you have a choice to go to a corporation, specifically a foreign corporation, and I'm sure you can name some of them, like one of those big ones from Arkansas. Or you can go out and spend your hard-earned Federal Reserve notes. You can, you know, pass your debt around to individual business people, you know, fellow Texians. And who are you going to support? Who do you want to be able to have the privilege of conducting your affairs with? Now, think of it this way. If you can buy a product from a foreign corporation, and they're going to tag you 8.25% probably around that area, or you can come to an individual that doesn't collect the state sales tax, there's 8.25% of your income that you're not having to fork over. And you figure out what that's really worth to you. And so if you go back into the tax code, and I know this is another issue, but there are so many exempted items, foods exempted, water's exempted, so many of your household items. How come you pay in state sales tax when you go to the grocery store? How can you pay state sales tax when you buy bottled water? If you all will ever go back and look at the tax code and read it, it's chapter 151 in the tax code, you'll see that there's a list of exempted items that long that nearly everything that exists, in my opinion, looks like it is tax exempt. But don't you pay tax every time that you acquire some of this? Well, ignorance is no excuse. I've read it. It's boring as all get out, but I tell you what, It'll open your eyes to the fraud that's going on out there, and they are raping, robbing, and pillaging us like you would not believe. I looked on the website for the comptroller today. Did you know that each month they are generating about what I could calculate, $1.2 to $1.3 billion a month, and just in Texas? Over $1 billion a month in tribute that shouldn't even be collected or paid to some degree. Now, yeah, make the foreign corporations collect that tax. Make them pay it. But don't make people like me have to be a slave and work for nothing whenever I don't have to, and then threaten me whenever I don't want to comply. Anyway, thank you.
Or even now.
Yeah, what he was telling you is you've got to look at this thing. Everything is backwards. Everything they do to you is backwards. The only ones that pay taxes are foreign people. So guess what they've done to you? You're a foreign person. Why? Because you're foreign to the venue and jurisdiction of the United States Corporation. They've come in and told you that we're the government. And I think somewhere in the beginning of both nations, Texas and the United States, it says we the people are the government. See, they replaced we the people, and so people started thinking, because in the beginning your government was in the county you lived in, always was. The legislature has no authority to write laws concerning the people's rights. All of a sudden, people started looking toward Washington. They started looking toward Austin, Texas, and they started losing their county government. And now everything is being taken out of the county, and it's called state now. It's going to the state. You lost your treasurer. There used to be a treasurer in each county. Now you don't have a treasurer. You got a controller, a comptroller down in Austin. So everything is backwards. They write everything backwards, and they do everything backwards to confuse. And so you have to understand who you are, and then you can tell them who they are. As Scott told you, they are the servant. They're the public. How many of you ever, all these years you went around thinking you was the public, right? No, the public is the officials. That's the government officials. That's the United States. That is all of these county officials. That's all these people. They're the public. And so they write all of these laws to protect the public. They're protecting themselves, not protecting you and I. And we sit here and we each day we go by and they hit us over the head about this. They hit us over the head about that, and we say, well, I guess, they're allowed to do it. And that is not the way it is. I have a lot of people that had a man that emailed me, and he says, I don't know how you can say what you're saying. He says, I've been in this 30 years. I've gone into court over 300 times. And so I said, well, I don't go to court. And the courts are not mine. And he never had thought of it like that. Those courts are not your courts. The courts are corporation courts. They were all changed in 1973. You lost all your courts in 73. There hadn't been one open. But if somebody keeps telling you that a dog is a cat, after a while you'll think a dog's a cat. And that's what they said. Oh, this is a court. We have the greatest justice system in the world. We do. You've got well over 2 million people now in the federal system who are not even supposed to be they're into civil, but they're not into criminal. Federal is not supposed to ever delve in criminal. How could you get unless you're a criminal, how do you get people into jail in the federal court? And so all of this stuff has just been creeping, and what it is they've convinced us that they have venue and jurisdiction. And there's no venue and jurisdiction. We got involved in 4 or 5, now about 7 cases where they come in and they kick people's doors in and do stuff like that. And you don't ever go to the court. Don't ever go to their court. Don't ever go to Washington. Don't ever go straight to the agents who broke in. You say, who are you? Where'd you come from? See, they have no one has the authority to come into your house, in Texas especially. 9.41 of the code, the criminal code, says you have the right to protect your property. 9.42 says what? You have the right to use deadly force if necessary. That has never been challenged. As interesting, about 2 years ago, a man was shot over in Plano. He came into a man's house in the afternoon, didn't think the man was there, and he shot him, killed him. They had 3 attorneys on there, and they asked all 3 of them the same question: or that will they indict that man? He said every one of them said the same thing. There never has been a person in the state of in Texas who has ever been indicted and convicted for shooting somebody on their property. Never has been. Why? Because that's your property and you have the right to defend it. The issue in all of it is that they convince us through TV mostly now, but used to be on the radio, FBI and peace and war. And all of a sudden the FBI is the good guys. Well, gosh, they found that little baby of, I forget the guy's name, the guy that flew the plane, Lindbergh. Didn't they find the little baby? I mean, and so they started publicizing all these things of them coming into a state. Now, boy, if it happened in one state and it happened over here, then that gives the FBI the right to come from Washington, D.C. down into this state and investigate this thing. They have no jurisdiction. They've never been made a part of the people's government. Show me one time, one bill that's ever been put into the Congress, passed by Congress, that created the FBI. It's not there. The IRS has never been created. The CIA has never been created. And you say, well, where'd those people come from? They came in through what is called the Bretton Woods Agreement. They are the foot soldiers for, they call them, it's the Jesuits. They're the foot soldiers. They're the ones that take governments down and put governments in. This is their job, to go into those countries, cause all this stuff, and tear a government apart if they're not cooperating, and this is where they come in. But they have no venue and jurisdiction in this nation, in your house. This was proved over there in South Lake. They did that, and we went back after the agents. And the agents wrote back. There's the FBI, the FBI, CID, and IRS. And they wrote back. The FBI wrote back, and they said, well, the judge gave us a warrant. And we wrote back, and we said, judge don't have jurisdiction to issue a warrant to allow you to come in my house. He's no different from you. He came from Washington, D.C. He has a 10-mile square area that he has jurisdiction in, plus all the territories, but not in Texas. And so then all of a sudden they wanted to give all the stuff back and that they had taken. And we faxed them back. We said, no, he's not coming down to the federal building and pick that up. You're going to bring it back out here where you stole it from. And the police of this city, the chief of police, wants to be here when you come back out and show who it was that stole this property out of this man's house. The police were never called in on it, nor was the sheriff was ever called. They had no clue this was going on. And the chief of police out there literally put one of them, told 3 of his policemen, you take this guy and you put him to the edge of town, and don't you ever come back in my town. So when we did that, they faxed us back, and they said, that's unacceptable. They said, he's got to come down here and sign. I said, why should he have to come down and sign? He didn't sign to tell you to steal it. See? And so the issue and all, they didn't have jurisdiction. And they came out and served a summons, and I happened to be out there. And the FBI guy came up to the door, and he said, I need to speak to this man. And I said, who are you? And he said, well, I'm with the FBI. And I said, I don't care who you're with. Who are you? you see this sign on the door that says you're not to come in here again. I'm not coming in the house. And I said, okay, then I'll let you talk to him. He handed him a summons. We got a summons and then summoned the federal prosecutor to come into court. And we simply, see, you go down and get some of those summons, they're all signed by the clerk of the court already, so they're lethal. When you get a hold of one of them, you can subpoena anybody to come in. And they have to come in, I mean, because because they're already signed. So we subpoenaed him. And I said, equality under the law is paramount and mandatory. If you're going to make this man give his fingerprints, you're going to make him give this, then you're going to do the same thing. He has the same rights you have. And so I said, not only that, you're going to bring in this guy called the United States, and you're going to show your power of attorney to represent him. And and I gave him about 50 other questions. 6 of them went down to the building the day that he was supposed to go in. There was supposed to be a grand jury down there that he was going to have to give all this stuff to. Grand jury wasn't there. Not one person in that place would speak to these people. They had not one of them. And they had this place full of marshals. Not one of them would come down and say a word to them. Why? They didn't have jurisdiction. They wasn't even supposed to be in Dallas. And so the FBI came in and they told him, one of them overheard him tell him, said, well, they showed up. See, they expected him not to show up. Then they would send the marshals out to get him. And so he showed up, and he said, he showed up, and you're going to have to handle him. And he said, I'll take care of it. Well, all of them, they asked them their name, they all ran. I don't have a name. Why? Because they had been summoned to come to that court and give all this information. And so he finally, I told him, I said, now, if they ask you to do anything, you tell them you understand this is in commerce. And everything in commerce, all my rights are reserved under UCC 1-207. And so the FBI guy said, let's go take your fingerprints. The 6 men would not leave this man. They told him, we're not leaving. They'd tell him, y'all stay here. No, we're not. We're going to go with him. And so they said, we need your fingerprints. He said, you understand this is in commerce? Yes, I do. Okay, you understand then that all of my rights are reserved under UCC 1-207. And he said, yes, I do. So he said he put his fingerprints there and he signed it with reservation of all my common law rights, UCC 1-207. And he said, well, these things are not even good. And he tore them up and threw them in the trash and said, y'all might as well leave. They were there 4 hours. Not one person other than that FBI man spoke to them. Not one of them would have anything to do with them. Why? Because they hadn't given their rights up, and they knew that they didn't have venue and jurisdiction over it. The issue, and that's what that second set of papers is about, is venue and jurisdiction. It holds true on any of these courts. You realize that all of these people are simply debt collectors for this federal corporation. And it goes further than that. It goes to England. This is where the Bar Association's out of, is from England. And so all of the things that they collect from us, they're given to England, because in 1933, England threw not the people of the United States. They couldn't do that. They threw the corporation, the federal corporation, into bankruptcy. And they said, you borrowed money from us way back from 1913 when we put the Federal Reserve Bank in here. You hadn't paid it back, so we're putting you into involuntary bankruptcy. And in the involuntary bankruptcy, all you have to say is, all your property now is forfeited over to me until you pay every penny that you owe me. And so the United States went in, the corporation went into bankruptcy at that point in 1933. So it was actually about 1929, but it wasn't until 33 and when Roosevelt came in that everything went into effect. And how do you know this is what it's all about? Because the first statement Roosevelt made March the 9th, and back then they came into office in March instead of January like they do now. And the first statement he made was that all of the property now belongs to the state and will be used for the good of the state. And this is what they've been getting from us all this time, is through this. by contract. And you're going to see that everything then comes into these courts is by contract. Everything you do and say every day of your life is by contract. You're contracting every time you say something to someone, every time you write letters to someone, that's a contract. You remember women used to sue men because they'd write them a letter, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then they'd say, well, I'm going to marry somebody else. Then she'd sue him because he had made a contract with her, and now he was breaking the contract. But everything is about a contract in this system now. And so in 1938, they had a ruling by the Supreme Court called Erie Railroad versus Tompkins. Tompkins. I'm just kidding. But anyway, it brought in what is called law merchants. Now, you see it, if you study in any of this stuff, you see law merchants as UCC. UCC was made the supreme law of the land of the federal corporation in 1966. What is the supreme law? What was the UCC? It's simply codified. They started codifying everything. And they codified the law merchants and put it into all these different codes. And then in 1973, it became one half of the court. The other half of the court was the Administrative Procedures Act, which came around in 1946, was adopted by all the countries, the last one, all the states, and the last one, I believe, was Virginia in 1968. In 73, it became the other side, the courts, and they put all the courts into one court. They had to then make it to where you could not win on the defendant's side, because if you win, you can sue the district attorney for his bond and get his license. So they had to make it to where it was impossible almost for you to win. Just had a lady that, anyway, I've got the papers here somewhere, and she emailed me and she said, I believe it was Step that sent it to me, and she said, we won. She went into court. They were taking her children away from her. She went into court without an attorney and walked out with her children. And she said, in the email, she said, and they're afraid that I'm going to sue them. The talk in the courtroom was that they were afraid that she was going to sue them. So I sent her a criminal complaint to file on the district attorney or whatever attorney was representing, because that's what she can do. And she'll get his bond. He'll have to pay her, and he won't be able to practice again. And that's what they're afraid of. Why? Because you're a sovereign. They cannot harm a sovereign without paying for it. But if you remain incompetent in that court, you're not a sovereign. And so they do this to us, and so 99.5% of the time, the defendant loses. Why do they get so upset when someone comes up and finds out they've held a man in prison for 20 years, fixing to put him in the gas chamber, and all of a sudden they find out he didn't do it? And you've never seen one of those district attorneys yet say, man, we're sure sorry we made that mistake. This poor guy's had to stay in prison all these years. No, they'll say, oh, the jury found him guilty, so as far as I'm concerned, he's still guilty. Why are they doing that? Because they don't want him to sue them. See, this is the whole thing, and it's not a point of suing them. All you have to do is file that criminal complaint. Their bond is yours. They have to pay you, and then they cannot practice again because they can't be bonded. So the issue in all of this is we've sat here, and they've turned us upside down, and we're looking in a mirror trying to read things backwards, and that's a difficult thing to do. But if you'll understand and ever start taking this thing and saying, we the people are the government. I had three preachers over in Atlanta came up in one of the seminars, and they said, well, what do you do with Romans 13? You're to obey the government. I said, who's the government? We the people are the government. They said, oh, we had never thought of that. See, they had thought of the United States as being the government. The United States is not the government of this country. The government is the people. See, And nowhere does it give the legislature the right to ever write laws against the people's rights. The people's